Well, welcome everyone to Roundabout Books Thursday Night Author Series. Tonight we are going to be talking about a nonfiction book called My Place Among Fish. First, I wanted to give you a couple of updates about the store. We are open on our regular hours, which is 10 to 6 Monday through Thursday and 10 to 5 on Friday, Saturday, Sunday. If that changes, please always check our website or our Facebook page in case we do have to alter because of COVID or in case we have to back off on how many people can be in the store. That being said, we have our fingers and toes and everything else crossed to continue bringing you these events, including in person, which should start next month, September, with The Healing of Natalie Curtis by Jane Kirkpatrick. If you're unable to attend in the store, don't forget we will be streaming all of these events on Zoom as well, because we want to make sure as many people can be there as possible with everything that's going on in our world today. I also wanted to remind you that there's a bunch of Zoom only events that are coming up from really big authors. In September, we have The Four Winds by Kristen Hanna. On October, we have the new Jonathan Franzen book, Crossroads. So make sure to check out our website to find out how you can register for those. Some do require a book purchase. So tonight, we are so excited to have Kris Millgate joining us from Idaho Falls. Kris is the author of two books, the first being My Place Among Men, and this second one, which we're going to talk about tonight, My Place Among Fish. In this book, journalist Kris Millgate migrates the Chinook salmon, the kings of the Pacific Northwest, from the Oregon coast to the Idaho wilderness. So of course, that puts us right in the Pacific Northwest, where we all are and love to be. So Kris, I'm very excited to hear about this. I know that a lot of people are, because we know that salmon are really important to our area, but I think sometimes we forget how important and what exactly they go through to be in our ecosystem. So that being said, I would love to turn it over to you to learn more about this book.
Thank you for the invite and for having me here with your bookstore tonight. I appreciate the opportunity, even if it's just by screen. So until we can meet in person, this works very well. And I love that you bring up that we have salmon among us, and it's very important to all of us, but most of us don't realize what the fish are trying to do. And frankly, they're just trying to make their way with us in the way. Mm-hmm. So that's what we're going to look at with this book. And that was the goal all along, was just to show people what the wild is still trying to do with all of us right on top of them.
Absolutely.
Tonight, we're going to look at some video and some photos, and we'll look at wildlife, wildlands. I'll tell you a little bit about the book and what we're doing with it, and then we'll also have a little bit of time for questions. So we'll leave a little bit of that at the end. Let's go ahead and start. I'm going to share my screen, and you tell me what you see there.
Looks perfect.
Tightline Media logo. I own Tightline Media. I'm an outdoor journalist, and I started Tightline Media in 2006 after I spent a decade in TV newsrooms, and I decided to go freelance. So that's where Tightline Media comes in, as my work as a freelancer for print and video outlets. And I didn't really start learning how to even write book format till 2019. So books are a bit new to me. And the first thing I want to bring up when we talk here tonight is, let me get this rolling here. Is it going to go? There it goes. Obviously, in the Pacific Northwest, we have some magnificent wildlife and wildlands, and those places are where I get to work. That's my office. So a lot of times people see where I work and they think, well, you just play on the river all day. Well, what I do for a living is a lot different than play. I am very lucky to be able to work outside, even when it's summers like this summer where we're smoked in from wildfire and it's extremely hot. I do feel privileged to be able to work outside in landscapes like this, but this is my job. And so I bring that point up first because first and foremost, I'm a journalist. And a lot of people think that what I do outside is just fun and glamorous, and really a lot of days it is not fun and glamorous. But what I do for a living is cover outdoor and environment stories. It's not a hobby for me, it's my profession. That's how I feed my family, and I take my job serious. And I'm a little obsessive about what I do for a living. And I think that helps me put up with a lot of intolerable situations outside. And the reason that I bring up the distinction for you that I'm a journalist is this. There's a big difference between someone who knows how to fish and they want to tell stories because they think that'd be something cool to do about the outdoors. I am a journalist that just happens to know how to fish. And there's a difference there. And what's happening in a picture like this is he's just trying to catch a fish. He's just having it down the river. I'm trying to make sure that I actually get the shot if he actually gets fish. I'm not fishing. My rod isn't even there. So the dynamic's different and the priority is different. I want to make sure that I'm doing my job, even if my job happens to be outside where everyone else plays. Besides, I'm better at reporting than fishing anyway. This is my husband. We've been married 22 years and he's still waiting for a dull moment because there are not many in my chosen line of lifestyle. I wrote my first book, as Julie said. It was called My Place Among Men. I wrote that book in 2019. And what I did is I took the 2 decades of outdoor and environment stories that I've covered around the Pacific Northwest, the West, even into the rest of the nation. I took those most dynamic stories and put them in this book. Then I took the news angle and added a perspective to it, which would be the I perspective. When I'm covering an assignment for news, there's no I perspective. But if I'm telling a story inside of a book, I can add that perspective. What would happen over the years is people would start to say, what's it like to stand in the middle of a wildfire? What's it like to sort fish? What's it like to go nose to nose with a grizzly bear? And I realized at that point that people were interested in the story. They're interested in wildfire and grizzly bears and fish, but they're also interested in what it's like to try to do my job. And so that's the perspective I added inside this book. Well, there's one chapter in this book about salmon, and it takes place here. This is the Yankee Fork of the Salmon River in central Idaho wilderness. This is 850 miles from the ocean. And what you see in this picture is a gold dredge. And it came through the Yankee Fork 7 decades ago and turned the river upside down and inside out for gold. And that was the whole point. And all the rocks that you see there in the foreground, that is the river's guts, ripped up and thrown out, spit out basically as they collected the gold. This is how we developed the West. And this is what we did a century ago. This made sense. It seems crazy to us now, and that gold dredge is still sitting there. And it ripped up 7 miles of that drainage. But by some miracle that we don't fully understand yet as simple humans, Chinook salmon still make it all the way back to this spot, 850 miles from the ocean, despite hostile territory and horrible odds. So while I was working in this drainage, doing a story about the restoration of this drainage, we're putting this river back together, I saw my first Chinook salmon, and that was in 2016. And it was remarkable to see it, especially in a landscape that we had pretty much demolished for gold. And then more of the story comes in, because then I realized long before we developed the West and discovered gold here, the Algai Dika were here. Algai Dika translated means salmon eater. The Shoshone-Bannock tribes were in the Yankee Fork for salmon long before we were in there for gold. So the history of the watershed is significant in the way that we develop the West. And fortunately, because there are certain amounts of fish that make it back here from the ocean, just a few dozen make it. But because they make it back here, we're trying to put it back together. So historically, there would be 3,000 Chinook salmon that would swim from the Oregon coast to this spot in the Idaho wilderness. They would spawn and then they would die. In 2020, 37 fish made it back. That's it. But the hope is one day, more fish will make it back and they'll have a restored watershed here where they can spawn as they were meant to do. They were programmed to go all the way to the ocean and come all the way back to lay eggs. So the restoration project is a multi-year project, and little by little it looks better every year, but not many fish are actually making it all the way back. So when I was there in that 2016, I thought, my gosh, this fish just came from 850 miles away. What on earth does the rest of the journey look like? And wouldn't it be cool to show people what it looks like? this is what a fish looks like after swimming 850 miles. And if you had done the same thing, I would imagine you might look just as rough. This is basically a swimming corpse. And 850 miles from the ocean, a lot has happened to this fish. It's changed from saltwater to freshwater. It's had to swim through all of us. It's had to swim through 8 dams, 4 rivers, 3 states to reach the exact spot where it was born so it can lay its eggs and die. It's a pretty magnificent concept when you think about it. So I saw this fish and I thought, I need to figure out how to show everyone every mile of that 850-mile journey. This is the finish line where this fish lays eggs and dies. Let's see what the rest of it looks like. So I spent 3 years researching it, trying to plan it out. And I had a plan, and then the pandemic hit. And then my whole plan went out the window. And I thought, okay, all my work's going to go down the drain, just like everyone's work went down the drain. And I thought, there's got to be a way that I can do this. The fish are moving. The fish are coming home, regardless of the fact that none of us are moving. I want to follow them. So I thought out of the box and decided that desperate times call for creative measures. So I dumped my flights, dumped my hotel, dumped my crew. And I lived and worked out of a truck and camper, traveling solo from the ocean to Idaho all last summer. And that was how I could safely isolate myself and still do my job and keep myself healthy, keep everyone else healthy, and stay in touch with the fish as they migrated from the ocean to Idaho. And this was the perfect setup for what I needed to do because I could work 15-hour days and all the way along the route. And then I could park somewhere at night, like that boat ramp. And that was at Cascade Locks, Oregon. And it was a closed boat ramp. I was the only one allowed to sleep there. And they had to practice social distance and sign up. And I was the only one there at night. But I could sleep there, wake up in the morning, brush my teeth, but not my hair, and just put a hat on and do my job and then get in at night. And I would get in there and I would import all my footage every night. And I would eat and I would sleep for a few hours and then I would get up and do the same thing the next day. So it was this marathon of all in 100% focused on following salmon migration. And I can tell you right now, Oregon is absolutely beautiful, but I have no idea what it looks like with people. I mean, there was nobody there when I was there last June. And so the plus side of that is nobody walked in front of my shots, but it really was kind of a lonely feeling. The beaches were empty. Bonneville Dam was closed. I had to have special clearance to go to the dam even. So I didn't really see anybody in Oregon other than the few people that I interviewed. And of course, they had to be 6 feet away. I kept track of significant points along the 850-mile route. And those are places like Bonneville Dam, the first of 8 dams that fish returning to Idaho have to cross. There was also farms, wilderness, hatcheries, power plants, all those things are along the route, and fishermen. And I had spots where I would stop and shoot the footage and do the interviews. I also kept track of the fish and knew where they were on the route. And I talked to hundreds and hundreds of people before I left Idaho to follow the fish. And I narrowed down my research to 17 interviews. The whole point with this project was perspective. Everybody in the Pacific Northwest has a connection to fish. What is that connection and what does it mean to them? And so I interviewed everyone that you see in this photo, and they are farmers and they are fishers. They are dam builders and they are dam breakers. When you're talking about salmon trying to make it from the ocean to Idaho, there's a lot they go through, including 8 dams in the Columbia River Basin that are a major chain of 8, all the way from through Oregon and through Washington. So all of these people have a perspective, and most of them have a livelihood that depends on the Columbia River Basin and the way it operates today, even if how it operates today may not be ideal for salmon. So this is me at Bonneville Dam. I worked with a mask most of the time and nobody there. When I was at the dam, there were people that kept track of me. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers cleared me to go in, but they made sure that I didn't wander anywhere and that I kept my distance. What's interesting is no one was there except for the fish counters, but the fish counting room was so small I couldn't go in there. So I had to watch from the window. And also the only other people in there besides the fish counters were the carpet cleaners. And all of these facilities were cleaned meticulously while all of us weren't there. So a lot of the places I went, most of the time, only people I ran into was the people cleaning. On the road trip, I fell apart just like the fish do, and it was a bit uncomfortable. I had bruises, broken cameras, stitches. I had skin cancer diagnosis on my ear. That is not an elf implant. That is the top of my ear cut off because of skin cancer. It was rebuilt with parts of my face and my scalp in between my trips in Washington and Idaho. So there was a lot going on, and people at home were following me through bi-weekly updates that I would do on social media. And so this kind of a look was pretty obvious on camera. So I had to explain to everybody, look, I'm still on the road. We're still following fish, but yeah, I lost my ear. It took 6 months to rebuild my ear. So there was a lot happening to me that mirrored what was happening with the fish. And it was alarming and it was uncomfortable, but it was also the reality of trying to pull something off like this during a pandemic comes with a lot of challenges. But then I had a couple of layers of challenges on top of that. I had broken cameras, mile 200 of 850, my main camera broke. No one's expecting that. The wind dumped it in the dirt and broke the focus frame. So there was a lot going on that made it hard to do my job, but I still wanted to do it. But because there were things like breaking cameras, stitches, skin cancer, those kind of things started to kind of invade the story of the fish. And the whole point was to show people these fish. So when I got back home into the edit bay and I started sorting everything out, I wanted to make sure the story was about fish. So I pulled myself out of the film. That wasn't appropriate. I wanted people to showcase salmon. I wanted people to look at salmon. So I put that in the film. And as I started looking through all my footage, I have 25 hours of footage to shove into a 26-minute show. And I realized there was so much to it that could also go somewhere else, maybe in a book. And there were two themes that really stood out from what I had learned while I was on the road for 4 months. The first thing is this: the farther you are away from the ocean and the closer you get into Idaho to the finish line, the anxiety increases. This is a cross on the side of the road by Salmon, Idaho. It is salmon crucified for power. You don't see this in Oregon. And imagine if we did see this in the gorge. I mean, we would really be seeing the serious end of salmon if we started to see crosses crucifying salmon in the gorge. I just can't imagine even seeing this there. But this is what you see in Idaho. When you interview people in Idaho, they cry. That doesn't happen in Oregon. And that doesn't mean anything about Oregon's care level. Oregon most certainly cares about salmon and the disappearing act that's happening with salmon. But the urgency of losing the fish is not as strong in Oregon as it is in Idaho. When a species is about to blink out, the fringe loses them first. Idaho may be where Idaho salmon are born, but those salmon go through Washington and Oregon into the ocean to grow big before they come home. And so by the time they come back, Idaho is the fringe of their migration route. And while Oregon may be having shorter salmon fishing seasons, Idaho is losing salmon fishing seasons altogether. So the anxiety level is a bit higher here, which is why you see things like salmon crucified for power on the side of the road. The other thing I noticed is this. In the Pacific Northwest, everyone wants to save salmon. No one's arguing about that. What people argue about is how to save salmon. That's what raises hackles. And that's what gets people kind of fired up when you start talking about disappearing salmon and what's the fix-all. We've spent several decades trying to find a fix-all and we haven't found it yet. So dam removal comes up, and that's the hot button right now. Dams changed the West significantly a century ago when they went in. If they ever come out now, it will significantly change the West again, especially for farmers. They need those river systems with dams for first, they use it for irrigation of crops in Washington. They use a barge system to move crops from Idaho all the way to the coast. If you cut a dam, breach it, open it up, remove it, whatever you want to put a word on it for. If you tinker with a dam in a way that releases the flow of the water that's backed up behind it, you're changing the way farmers can use it in the various ways they use it. You're also changing the way the Pacific Northwest gets its power, and hydropower has been a big deal here. But here's the thing about where we're at with the debate right now that makes it pivotal. People are on the opposing sides of the issue of salmon are talking to each other. 20, 30 years ago, they didn't do that. They were not talking to each other. So that's why we're at a point right now where if we're going to figure out a way to bring back salmon numbers to an amount that we're all more comfortable with, now's the time to do it, because the opposing sides are actually sitting at the table talking and trying to figure out how to do it. How do we save the farms and save the fish? If we can figure that out, we're really going to get somewhere. So those were the two things I learned when I was on the road. Let's see if this will play right here. This is the first 2 minutes of my film, Ocean to Idaho, and it demonstrates to you what we're talking about when there's the dynamic of people with different perspectives trying to figure out what to do without losing their livelihood. And it becomes pretty clear that at some point, all of us are going to have to lose something if we think salmon are going to gain anything.
I have dreams about what full salmon runs look like. I can see it, and I don't know if that's normal, but it is for me. Salmon are an identity. To be linked in with salmon is to live a traditional life.
You can't really grow up in the Northwest without salmon as your icon.
Salmon are interwoven into the culture and the economics of the Pacific Northwest.
Fish are a critical component of Northwestern legacy.
They're a cornerstone of who we are, what we do.
These fish rely on a huge geographic area. You know, they don't recognize political borders, but that's how we manage them.
It's a very complicated issue to say, are fish worth so much that we're willing to take down dams?
It's a tough place to be, but it's a magnificent opportunity to contribute to the Pacific Northwest.
We have a great opportunity here to change the world with salmon.
It's not just about salmon recovery. It's about our connection to this earth.
So that's everything that happened in front of the camera. Everything that happened behind the camera is in this book, My Place Among Fish. And this gives you kind of the backstory on what it's like to follow fish from the ocean to Idaho and do it during a pandemic and stand at the finish line with stitches in 4 places and a camera held together with duct tape.
Hi, I'm Kris Millgate.
Yes.
Dusty dry here.
Oh. So following salmon from the ocean to Idaho, it's pretty simple as far as how I describe it. It is frustrating and it is fascinating. It is beautiful and it is brutal. And I say all that, and then I can easily say that I would do it all over again just to witness the miracle of it all, but I would change a few things. I would do it next time around without stitches and without masks and with my boys and with my husband. But the rest of it, I would keep just the same. It's remarkable to see the whole journey. Even when you're seeing it, it still seems unbelievable. And putting the backstory in about the route with that more personal side in the book. I'm happy that we figured out how to do that. And I didn't expect that to happen, but I'm really proud of where the book went once I started editing everything. And Roundabout sells this book, so you are welcome to pick it up from Julie. And I've thrown a lot at you, so I'm going to go ahead and let us open up for questions. I also want to tell you that one of the reasons we did this book event tonight was because Ocean to Idaho airs for the first time on Oregon Public Broadcasting tonight. So 8:30 Pacific time, right when we're done here, if you want to hop on and watch that, you can see the whole film here tonight. Go ahead with questions.
Well, thank you so much, Kris. And I am really excited about the OPB airing tonight. I have a feeling this question is probably answered in the book, but perhaps we can kind of talk about it for everybody real quick.
Yep.
Why are only 37 salmon making it to the Yankee Fork? Is it about, I mean, it's obviously a plethora of reasons, but is it, perhaps, is it overfishing? It's the dams. I mean, have we possibly reached a point of no return?
I think asking if we're at a point of no return is certainly a fair question. I get that often. I think you have two questions there. I'll address the point of no return first. And that is when people ask me, how can you be optimistic when only 37 fish make it to the Yankee Fork of the Salmon River? And my answer is easy. 37 is 37 more than zero.
Mm-hmm.
The fish are not done yet. We are not done yet. So we never give up on the wild, never give up on ourselves with having the ability to figure out how to make them make their way with us in the way.
Yeah.
We will figure this out. As far as what's causing the decline, it isn't necessarily one thing. It's the case of death by 1,000 cuts. It's a lot of things. And, you're expecting an animal to move through 3 states and 4 rivers, 850 river miles.
Right.
They were built to make that migration. They're born in Idaho. They go to the ocean when they're as long as your finger. 2 to 3 years later, they come back longer than your arm. They were built for this.
Yeah.
But a century ago, it took a few weeks. Now it takes a few months. It comes down to things as simple as, do people still fish for them? Certainly. Everything loves to eat salmon. Whales, seals, us. Everything wants to eat salmon.
Yeah.
They were kind of designed to feed the masses, and they did at one time. And their decomposing bodies at the end of the journey feed the forest.
Right.
It all makes sense when you look at it, but there's just so many things in the way. I think if you were to cut fishing seasons, well, you already have. That really hasn't made a dent. Trucking them around the dams, well, we're already doing that.
Right.
That hasn't fixed it either. There's a whole bunch of things that we've tried. We're fixing habitat. The Yankee Fork's a prime example. We're fixing habitat, but the fish aren't getting there. How valuable is that repaired habitat going to be for them? So it's just a whole bunch of things stacking up.
Yeah.
And then you also have the climate changing. Our planet changes. It's changing in spite of us, and now it's changing because of us.
Yeah.
So the water's warmer. There's all kinds of other pressures that are in there on top of that. And there's a lot of things that they're trying to compete with. And when you realize how much is weighing on them, even the fact that our plastic washes out to the ocean,
right,
they have to swim through everything we dump in the water. Things just as simple as that. Then you start to go, oh, kind of makes sense why not many are making it back. They're either getting eaten or they're dying long before they get to the spot they were supposed to go to.
Yeah. And unfortunately, they're not necessarily getting eaten by communities that used to rely on them for substance and sustenance and, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that goes back to, the Agaidika. They're the Shoshone-Bannock tribes. Agaidika means salmon eater. As the salmon disappear, that tribe is losing their identity. That's how closely tied they are. So yeah, you've got a whole dynamic of people that relied on that for food that don't have it right now.
Yeah. I mean, I know there's a lot of that in Oregon. There are quite a few tribes and not just salmon, obviously, but other other forms of food, that they have been limited on what they can fish, even though they were here first.
Yeah, I fished with the Umatilla
Hmm.
around Cascade Locks, and the fisherwoman I was with, she caught one sockeye salmon the day I was with her, and she couldn't sell it. There was no commercial season, but by tribal right, she could take it home and feed it to her family. And her son's favorite part was the tail.
Really?
Yeah.
That's very cool. So your book is about your journey, but I have a feeling it also goes a step further and is basically a call to action for people to get involved in the helping of salmon.
Yeah, there's an awareness component here for sure. And it's with the film and it's with the book. And it's not me saying to you, this is what I want you to think.
Right.
This is how to think. It's just that I want you to think.
Right.
I want you to think about what you're doing when you chuck that gum wrapper out your window.
Yeah.
I want you to think about what you're doing when you let that plastic bottle run down the gutter, and where it all goes and what has to swim through it. It's an awareness of our natural resources in a way that a lot of people aren't connecting with our natural resources right now. And I think that, especially with the pandemic, people found the outdoors.
Mm-hmm.
Now we have to make sure that those outdoors will still be there to find for everyone else. And so we've got to figure out how to be in the landscape without making it so the landscape cannot persist.
Right.
And that includes wildlife and wildlands. And so it's not that, part of this migration route's roadless wilderness, and I had to do that 80 miles by a raft.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not expecting you to get on a raft and learn how to row, or even, I'm not even expecting you to learn how to fish. But begin your connection with our natural resources and do it in a way that can be as simple as sticking your feet in a creek. Figure out, plug in to what actually sustains us.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we start, right? And then you start to have this awareness of, hey, here's what else is trying to live in this water and migrate back with all of us here. If we can just raise the awareness, then we'll shift the tide as to, hey, there's only 37 that made it back to the Yankee Fork. There's supposed to be 3,000. How do we fix that? So I think, within the scheme of everyone figuring out how to feed their kids for dinner, what they're going to have for dinner and how to pay their mortgage, somewhere in there's going to have to be a priority for natural resources. And I think it's starting to surface.
Yeah.
And so that's what I'm trying to key in on. So people check in on the issue instead of checking out. It gets pretty complicated pretty quick. Sticking your feet in the creek and you'll get it. You'll figure out why that watershed matters.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Linda, I don't want to dominate the questions because I know that you, as an avid reader, and you were saying as a volunteer at the High Desert Museum, I'm sure have plenty to say about this. So go ahead.
Well, I have a question, Kris, that may sound funny because I can't find good answers about this. I have heard that, I understand about how they go back upstream. I understand about fish ladders and water elevators and trucking and all of that. But what I have heard is that it's almost more dangerous for the smolt to go downstream. And in a lot of cases, they are not able to use the fish ladders in the reverse way. Can you tell me how they get down? Do they just, they come along the top of the reservoir and then just flip over the dam? Which dams can they, and the Columbia system, can they use the fish ladders to go downstream? How do the smolts, what is making it so hard for the smolts besides things like predators and all the things that other things?
When you're on the Columbia River in Oregon and you'll see barges come by,
Huh?
Some of those barges have crops. Oftentimes wheat from northern Idaho is on those barges.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing that's on those barges is fish. There's certain barges that are carrying fish, and that is moving them, those smolts, those finger length fish, they're moving those down the system.
I heard
So
that we're doing some of that. Is that true?
But I didn't hear that. What was
I
it?
heard that the Umatilla were involved in some of that.
Yes. So the tribes are involved in a lot of things when it comes to saving fish. Frankly, they have rights to those fish and fishing rights. And so they're willing to try to do things to keep those rights. Those shouldn't go away. So yeah, they do a lot of work. And so that's one way they move. But the other thing to think about is this, you're correct. A lot of the mortality happens when the fish is as long as your finger and it's trying to get from Idaho to the ocean. Those fish are actually they kind of point these fish are designed to go against the current. That's how they come home. So they actually they aren't really good swimmers on their way out when they're longer than your finger, when they're the size of your finger. They ride spring runoff. It's the current that's taking them out to the ocean. When they come back, they've got to fight that current. But on their way out, when they're little, they ride the runoff. When you get to a dam, what happens to the runoff? It stops, it completely stops. It's a reservoir, that's a pool behind the dam. And those small fish get lost in there. There's no current. That gives them the obvious. This is the way, go this way. And so they kind of flounder in there and they're easy pickings. Yeah. So you've got birds and you've got seals now coming up. So everything can eat them there. And so, yeah, a lot of fish die before they never even see the salt water. And in the salt water, they face a whole bunch of other issues. And then they got to come home and face issues again.
So how do they get around the dam?
Well, so if they're barged, they can be trucked around.
Barged, how do they get?
They can be barged or trucked around, but they can use kind of like that ladder system. But I think the ladders help the adult fish more than anything.
And I've heard that some fish ladders they can't use, and I don't know why they can't use them.
This probably has to do with the design. So I did not see every fish ladder at every dam. And the chain of 8 does have fish ladders, but there are other dams in the Columbia River Basin that don't even have ladders. So no fish is getting
First part of your sentence? The first part, did you say all 8?
The 8 in the Columbia River Basin have ladders.
Okay.
And, but not, no, the main 8 that the fish coming back to Idaho have ladders, but not all dams in the Columbia River Basin have ladders. So there are certain dams that are built without ladders. That's a dead end. They can't do anything with that. But the chain of 8 that we're talking about, the four major ones in the Columbia and the 4 major ones in the Snake, those have fish passage. Even Bonneville, built back in 1938, was built with fish ladder. Yeah, so they recognized that they were stopping fish and they were trying to figure out a way to get around it, even back then.
Yeah. Yeah. So if they can't get down the fish ladder and they're not barged, is there any other way? Do they go over the top? Do they?
Well, I guess I could go over the top, but that would be something you're going to want to check with dams because I didn't follow smolts.
Okay.
And because during the pandemic, I only got to go inside one of the dams. I saw all 8, but I was only allowed inside one. So and the smolts weren't really moving. I was looking for adults coming home.
I was just trying to get that straightened out in my mind, particularly if, well, I want to know, but particularly if someone asks me a question at the museum, I give my talk, oh, are there any questions? I just keep looking for that one.
If you think about spring runoff, those smolts leave early. When that snow starts melting, they start going. And so most of them have moved through the system by the time the adults are trying to come back from a few years earlier. You might see a little bit of overlap, but most of the babies have gone to the ocean by the time the adults start making their way through the system.
Okay, thank you.
So, Kris, you mentioned climate change, and I know that I've been hearing about it on NPR and OPB because June and July were the hottest months on record. And I don't know about where you are in Idaho, but where we are here in Central Oregon and even a friend up in Portland, hitting 115 here is, I've lived here for 40 years, never seen it. I hated every second of it.
I can't even believe that it was that hot.
It's wrong.
Yeah.
Flip side, as that happens and we're getting less snow, which means that we're getting less runoff, and
right.
We're seeing it. We drove through Santiam Pass in May to go to the coast, and the lakes are the lowest I've ever seen them in my life. So you have that compounded of the water is changing temperature, but also there's less water for them to get pushed out to the ocean with.
Well, and if you think about how our landscape is designed, our mountains are our biggest reservoirs we could ever have. No man-made structure is ever going to replace the snowpack that is held in the mountains.
Yeah.
And when that melts and comes down, that's a tremendous amount of flow. And we might still be getting the same moisture, but we're getting it as rain instead of snow, and we're getting it at the wrong time.
Yeah.
So it does a lot. People might say, well, we're getting a ton of rain, that'll fix it. But it's not at the right time.
Right.
And it's not melting and coming out. It's like all in one day. We got more rain here today than I think we've seen all summer. That never happens. That's weird.
Yeah.
And then you have the temperature issue. So last summer when I was on the Salmon River following Chinook salmon, the water was mid 50s. And you know that it's right for trout and salmon because you put your toes in and you go, because it's that cold. This summer, when I was on the exact same stretch of water, the exact same time of year, both sides of the river were on fire. So there was flame coming down to the water, hoses going up to it to try to protect the historic homesteads that are up there. And the water was so warm, I kept wondering if somebody had peed in it. And that's when you know it is not the right temperature for fish. When it's getting up to 70 degrees and I'm thinking, oh, this is like feels comfortable to a human. It does not feel comfortable to a cold water fish like a salmon. So there's ash on the water, but then there's also a warmer temperature, which really screws with the oxygen level they need.
Yeah.
And that makes it hard for them to migrate as well.
Yeah, it's definitely alarming. I appreciate your optimism that there are people, and by reading your book and you putting this out in the world, you will find more people. Sometimes it feels like there are too many problems to tackle.
Yes.
But I know that for a lot of people, when you find the right one that you want, that your passion speaks to, it can make all the difference. So in that, I want to thank you, because stitches and your ear and everything else, this was definitely a passion project. We can see it, we can hear it. I think it'll translate to a lot of people, hopefully watching the show tonight. Yeah, I know that it must feel, almost insurmountable, but I really appreciate you taking this on and bringing this to our information, to us.
Thank you. You are welcome. I think what I want is for people to understand a very complicated issue in simple terms. And as soon as you throw politicians into it, people turn off. So let's hear some real people talk about it. Let's get some perspective that makes sense for everybody to understand, so that they can actually key in on it versus tune it out.
Absolutely. And I'm sure it must be that much harder when you're talking about 3 different states, Oregon, Washington, and Idaho, and we've all been connected for so long, but we all also have our issues. There's been some talk recently because they want to build another bridge between Portland and Vancouver, but who's going to pay for it?
Oh, yeah, good question, right?
Yeah, it's a very good question for people above me, but I know that there's a lot of things that people can do on an everyday basis, and it sounds like that's where you're coming into it. And I know that that's where people in Oregon, I love where I live. I won't speak for Linda, but I have a feeling that a lot of the people who live in this area really love it for those reasons. And we need to start working harder for our state.
Yeah. And the last thing I would want is for people to feel helpless,
right,
or hopeless. That's not the goal here at all. And we don't have either of those, helpless or hopeless, until we're at 0.
Right.
And we're not there.
Well, excellent. Linda, if you have any other questions, please feel free. I appreciate so much both of you taking the time to be here with me tonight for this event. I'm very excited to share this on our YouTube channel and our other social medias. And Kris, I hope if you do another book, or maybe after next salmon season, if you find your way into the Central Oregon area, we would love to have you at the store. Yeah, this area is all about the outdoors, and I know that there are a lot of people who will take your words to their heart and want to do something.
Oh, I would love to come back, especially because it would be so great to see Oregon with people.
I know. Sometimes
It's
they're great. Sometimes people are the best. Well, we really appreciate authors like you who reach out to our store and vice versa, who help support us by continuing to have great books for us to sell to people. I know you signed the copies that you sent to us.
I did.
So I personally am one. I love a signed copy of a book. It just makes me feel that much more warm and fuzzy. So please, everyone, stop by the bookstore, pick up your copy of Kris's book. If you're not able to come into the store, you can always pick it up from the red bench so that you are safe and more than 6 feet apart. Please always let us know when you want to do that. Kris, it's been amazing. I'm going to make a little snack and go watch the OPB show tonight.
Thank you for having me tonight.
Yeah. Thank you for being here, Linda. Thank you, Chica. Everyone have a great evening, great weekend. Stay cool, stay safe, and keep reading.
Thank you.
Thank you.